Some good reflections coming up this morning around chanting and communal standards, and it's one thing I've thought about a lot over the years is the chanting and the way we chant here as a community, and how each country has its own version of the Pali chanting, and each of those versions is the true way that it was done in the time of the Buddha. So we've got the Sri Lankan chanting, the Thai chanting, the Burmese chanting. They're all very different from each other. So at a certain point, we have to find something that's good enough. It's good to put effort into it and try to do it correctly. But then at a certain point, it's about harmonizing with people and doing something that's going to help us build up our faith and inspiration in the practice. So that's the spirit of it, that's what it's for. And also this reflection on not wasting food came up, and how I know at like City of 10,000 Buddhas they do this, where they some of the Mahayana sutras don't waste a single grain of rice, and of course we can't do that here because we rely on offerings that are given to us. If you can be very, very controlling about the community, like exactly what you buy, exactly what's made, not accepting offerings from outside, controlling it very strictly, then you can succeed in, if that's, you make that a very high priority in terms of not wasting anything, then one can actually control all the cooking and all the food to make it that way, in order to meet that goal or meet that standard. And but that's more of a external thing. So looking at the internal qualities that we're trying to cultivate. So for us here, receiving offerings, it does happen. We're going to have to waste a bit of food sometimes, and that's fine. I know like Longbar Pasano and Ajahn Sek, they're always very good about taking the right amount and not having much or any food left over in their bowls, and that's a good skill to develop as well. But by no means, it's not a super high priority for us to not waste anything. So that's one of the differences between the traditional Theravada and the Mahayana approaches. I remember a story of Lumpur Sumedho because as being a very idealistic Westerner in the northeast of Thailand in the late 1960s, then as a junior monk at Wat Nong Papong, they just have, of course, Theravada monasteries, so they have all sorts of food that comes in. They have vegetables, fruits, and also meat dishes that come in. And Ajahn Sumedho at that time, very idealistic, and think, well, I'm going to be a strict vegetarian, even here in the northeast of Thailand, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be a strict vegetarian. And so he was practicing strict vegetarianism, which is extremely difficult. It's much easier to do here, but extremely difficult to do at Wat Papong at that time. So he was being very good with it, being very strict with it, and then he said at a certain point he had this realization that, well, did he ordain to be a vegetarian, or did he ordain for liberation? So he was actually making the vegetarian practice a higher priority than liberation in his mind, and putting all of his focus on that and trying to make that correct. And so not that that's not a good practice. That is a good practice to take on for anybody who wants to take that on. But knowing what the priorities are and why are we doing it, what's the usefulness of it. So for anything, it's knowing why are we doing it. Is the Namo Tassa chant going to be more auspicious if we get all the retroflexes right and pronounce it perfectly, absolutely, correctly? So not necessarily. It really depends on the intention. So if we begin a Dhamma talk and chant the Namo Tassa absolutely correctly, but our intention is to show everybody the true, correct way to do it, and that everybody else is not doing it correctly, then that's going to be actually less efficacious than somebody chanting it quote unquote wrongly, like in these Burmese monks doing circumambulations at the Bodhi tree, and they were their version is they believe that's the true way to do it, and that sounds like that's Namo Dada Bhagavado, so that's the true way to do it for them. So, but depending on how the heart does it, then that's really what's important. The Krubajans, they're all about the heart, all about the spirit. So the letter, we train in the letter, it's really all about cultivating the spirit. It's not about getting the letter perfect. Even though doing it really good and putting our heart into the letter of the rules is a good thing, but it's not about getting it perfect and then getting an A+ on our conduct, getting graded on how well we do things, because it can always be done better. It can always be done in a more refined way. But it's more about the cultivation of the spirit. So we go about our day. We do things good enough. We aren't going to be able to make ourselves into computers or robots. There's always going to be that human aspect to what we do as we go about our day. And we do have standards, but then we might slip up, or we might see others slip up, so to take a very forgiving attitude about it, and we can maybe talk about it at the right time. But we don't want to be too rigid. There has to be that kind of fluidity there as well. And actually, perfection of conduct doesn't mean doing it exactly the right way, exactly the same every time, but it means knowing what's right to do in any given time. What's the appropriate response? Letting go is appropriate response. Panya is appropriate response. So, what's the appropriate response to any particular situation? And then when we have appropriate response, then we learn about non-suffering. We learn about how to go about our life with non-suffering. So that's what we're trying to do. Leave that for reflection this morning.